What is the purpose of self-realization? Self-realization is the final goal, and is itself the purpose. Why do you ask about self-realization? Why don't you rest content with your present state? It is evident that you are discontented, and your discontent will come to an end if you realize the self. The nature of reality is existence without beginning or end, eternal, existence everywhere, endless, infinite, existence underlying all forms, all changes, all forces, all matter and all spirit. The many change and pass away, whereas the one always endures. The one displaces the triads such as knower, knowledge, and known. The triads are only appearances in time and space, whereas the reality lies beyond and behind them. They are like a mirage over the reality. They are the result of delusion. But, you ask, if I am an illusion, who casts off the illusion? The I casts off the illusion of I, and yet remains I. Such is the paradox of self-realization. The realized do not see any contradiction in it. Some people who come here don't ask me about themselves, but about the Jivan Muktas, the liberated souls while still embodied. Do they see the world? Are they subject to destiny? Can one be liberated only after leaving the body, or while yet alive? Their questions are endless. Why worry about all these things? Does liberation consist in knowing the answers to these questions? So I tell them, never mind about liberation. First, find out whether there is such a thing as bondage. Examine yourself first. In a sense, speaking of self-realization is a delusion, an illusory escape from an illusory prison. It is only because people have been under the delusion that the non-self is the self and the unreal the real, that they have to be weaned out of it by the other delusion called self-realization. Because actually the self always is the self. And there is no such thing as realizing it. Who is to realize what? And how? When all that exists is the self, and nothing but the self. Heaven is as real as your present life. But if we ask who we are and discover the self, what need is there to think of heaven? Where is the Supreme Self or heaven unless in you? There are no stages in realization or mukti. There are no degrees of liberation. There are no levels of reality. There are only levels of experience for the individual, not of reality. If anything can be gained, which was not there before, it can also be lost. Whereas the Absolute is eternal, here and now. Can a man become a high official merely by seeing one? He may become one only if he strives and equips himself for the position. Similarly, can the ego, which is in bondage as the mind, become the divine self simply because it has once glimpsed that it is a self? Is this not impossible without the destruction of the mind? Can a beggar become a king by merely visiting a king and declaring himself to be one? Realization takes time to steady itself. The self is certainly within the direct experience of everyone, but not in the way people imagine. One can only say that it is as it is. Just as incantations or other devices can prevent fire from burning a man when otherwise it would do so, so vasanas can veil the self when otherwise it would be apparent. Owing to the fluctuations of the vasanas, realization takes time to steady itself. Spasmodic realization is not enough to prevent rebirth, but it cannot become permanent as long as there are vasanas. In the presence of a great master, vasanas cease to be active and the mind becomes still, so that samadhi, absorption in realization, results. Just as in the presence of various devices, fire does not burn. Thus the disciple gains true knowledge and right experience in the presence of a master. But if this is to be established, further effort is necessary. Then they will know it to be their real being, and thus be liberated while still living. One that would abide in the self should never swerve from their one-pointed attention to the self, or the pure being that they are. If they slip or swerve away from that state, several kinds of visions conjured up by the mind may be seen. But one should not be misled by such visions, which may be of light or space, nor by the nada or subtle sounds that may be heard, nor by the visions of a personified God, seen either within oneself or outwardly, as if they had an objective reality. One should not mistake any of these things for the reality. When the principle of intellection by which these visions and so on are cognized or perceived is itself false or illusory, how can the objects thus cognized, much less the visions perceived, be real? There are some foolish persons who, not realizing that they themselves are moved by the divine power, seek to attain all supernatural power of action. They are like the lame man who said, "I can dispose of the enemy if someone will hold me up on my legs." Since peace of mind is permanent in liberation, how can they who yoke their mind to powers which are unattainable except through the activity of the mind become merged in the bliss of liberation, which subdues the agitation of the mind? You ask about knowing your past lives. Do you know the present life so well that you wish to know the past? Find the present, then the rest will follow. Even with your present limited knowledge, you suffer so much. Why should you burden yourself with more knowledge? Is it so as to suffer more? The spiritual force of realization is far more powerful than the use of all occult powers. Inasmuch as there is no ego in the sage, there are no others for them. What is the highest benefit that can be conferred on you? It is happiness, and happiness is born of peace. Peace can reign only when there is no disturbance, and disturbance is due to thoughts that arise in the mind. When the mind is itself absent, there will be perfect peace.